Ben, I think you and I probably have as much respect for anybody in this business on opposite sides, and I don't want to get into some kind of a food fight here. But let me just say a couple of things I don't think you're taking account of yet so far in our conversation. Number one, before he said those things, he used that term "on many sides," and the problem with that is, and maybe what he was trying to refer to was back to some of the stuff last night. But can you imagine an American president coming out after Fort Hood? When a Muslim killed a bunch of Americans, saying, well, there's been violence on many sides, or something like that. We have ISIS-like tactics now, mowing people down in cars, happening in the United States. That's only coming from one side. There are people coming out, open carry, shields. That's only happening on one side. And so I think the reason that the words that you're talking about didn't land as well, Ben, is because he said that many sides point. Can you understand why when you kind of have a false equivalence about the violence, then the other comments don't land as well?
Well, let me say this. When you talk about open carry, for example, there were people that were open carrying when the police officers were shot down in Dallas that night when I was there. So you can't just look at one situation.
And President Obama condemned that very directly.
Let me say this. And so did the president. He used the word, Trump condemns egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence.
Which side? Which side? On both sides? Well, on many sides? He did that on many sides. That's the problem.
I just tweeted out a picture of a young man with a flamethrower using a can of spray paint on fire at some of the other people on the other side that was put out by a major news organization today in Charlottesville. There is violence on both sides. If you're using a can of spray paint as a flamethrower at people, the white supremacists, that is violence on both sides. Go look at the picture and tell me there was not violence on both sides. And the president was, everyone go home tonight. Everyone go home and stop the violence is his point tonight. And we should both be able to say that without having to worry that someone's going to take us out of context.
Well, I think here's the problem is that people are not taking them out of context. You may be taking them out of context. I got a chance to, as did you. I watched the whole thing start to finish. And I was hopeful that he would be as forceful. Listen, when you had that shooting in Dallas, President Obama was absolutely forceful, is unequivocal. We weren't having conversations about, well, was he condemning the violence? Was he condemning the protesters? Was he condemning somebody else? He was clear. He was forceful. When you have an act of terrorism in the United States, the mere fact that you and I are sitting here having to parse the words of the president, and you want this cinnamon, that is a failure of leadership on its face. So, listen, there's nobody that wants for us to come together in today more than me, and I think the president could have done a better job helping us. And for you to say that would you give him an A+, A-, a C, a D? You think it was an A+ speech when somebody was just murdered in America for their political beliefs by a Nazi?
Well, I'll say it again. Egregious display of hatred, bigotry, which very clearly talks to white supremacy and racism, and violence, which talks directly about the act. He then said, no matter our color, creed, religion, or political party, we are all Americans first.
That part's good. That part's good.
Let me ask you a follow-up question, Ben.
That part's good.
A good job.
I think everybody agrees that those words, those are appreciated. But Ben, the president was asked specifically about why he didn't use the words white nationalists, or what does he say to the white nationalists, the white supremacists who were at that rally, in follow-up questions following that news conference, and the president simply didn't answer the question.
Well, he didn't answer any of the questions, so let's not act like he chose not to just not answer that question. He didn't take questions.
Why doesn't he answer the question? That's the point of the problem with his statement.
This goes back to David Duke. He's already condemned David Duke. He's already condemned the KKK and those groups during the campaign.
Why not condemn them again?
He should have done it earlier.
Why not condemn them again?
He condemned them by using the words an egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence.
I want to answer your question.
Clear words talking about the white supremacists. I mean, here's my thing. Are we now at a point in this country when the president walks out and he says displays of hatred, bigotry, and violence, he condemns them at the strongest point. It says, as strong as I can condemn them, I condemn them. Does he have to walk out there and check every box so that everyone will be calm and say, KKK, check. David Duke, check. White supremacists, check. And he can't just say egregious display of hatred, which encompasses all of
Can I answer your question from the beginning? You asked me a question.
Okay, let me ask you the question.
You asked me a question at the very beginning, which I didn't get a chance to answer because I got a little bit emotional. Sure. You said, what could the president have said that would have been, I think, more comforting? And I think there are a couple of things that he could have said. First of all, He could have said that he is going to use the full resources of the federal government to find all the conspirators, because it seems to be clear now that there wasn't just one guy with a car. There was a whole thing happening there. I think if he had said, listen, I am not going to tolerate this, and I'm going to act as president. I'm not just going to say that the hatred should stop. I'm going to use the full force of my powers to get to the bottom of this and make sure it doesn't happen again. Those are the things that a president says that sends a clear signal. What you want from the president is a clear signal to the people who may be thinking this is now legitimate politics in America, that you are going to now be against the President of the United States and the full power of his office. I didn't get that impression from that comment. Maybe there will be more, but he left a lot on the table in that first comment.
When he said that he talked to the governor, who's a pretty liberal governor, who's not a conservative, and said that they both agreed and they had a very clear conversation, and that he was going to make sure that the federal government was available for the resources needed for the citizens in that state, and they agreed about people going home and coming together, I don't think there's any indication, and there's no reason to imply, that the president is somehow not giving the full support to the governor who he spoke to and going to give the full support of the federal government to do what needs to be done. Is there any doubt in your mind that the individual who is driving the car, that apparently has been arrested, is somehow not going to be held accountable for his actions? And there's no one out there in law enforcement that's saying he's not going to be charged with a hate crime, which I think he will be and should be. But I think we're trying to criticize things that haven't even happened yet.
No, Ben, here's the thing. One of the things that you like about Donald Trump is the forcefulness and the clarity of his communication. And we are now in a situation where there were opportunities, and I don't think you can argue. I mean, listen, I don't think you want to go march on every plank here. He could have been more forceful in condemning the person who killed an American today. He was not forceful in condemning apparently a Nazi who killed an American. Now, you can say that there's some language that we could all be happy about, and I'm going to agree with you. There was some language we should all be happy about. But there is something very, very disturbing to me when you have this kind of thing. And because other acts of terrorism, he never gets tired of condemning other forms of terrorism. He never gets tired of condemning Islamic forms of terrorism. But he has a one-time denunciation of David Duke, who's out there today stirring up trouble, and he never has to say anything about it again. There's something wrong with that. It's not right.
Van, I don't think you give legitimacy by giving, for example, David Duke exactly what he wants. David Duke wants to be on TV and to recruit white supremacists and to inspire them. You don't talk about a guy like that and put him on TV because that's exactly his goal. So anytime he can run out there and mention anything about any politician that gets him on TV, he's going to do it.
But why
David
not white
Duke
supremacists?
Is a disgusting and vile human being.
Of course. But why not white supremacists? Why not terrorists?
Van, let me ask you this question, Van, real quick. Yeah. I mean, could it be that somebody like David Duke is using the president as cover?
Sure. Hey, listen, he does. All I'm saying is, if you at some point you say he doesn't have to say David Duke, he doesn't have to say white supremacists, doesn't have to say white nationalists, doesn't have to say terrorists, doesn't have to say thug, doesn't have to say any of the things he says about other similar things, and that begins to send a signal. What you don't want is a dog whistle today. You want a megaphone today. You want a bullhorn today. And what we got was too much of the dog whistle. Hey, listen, I'm just giving you the feedback.
Van, if a dog whistle is using words, egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence
on many sides,
then you're stretching so much here to try to turn this into some political.
But it is the on many sides that seems to bother so many people. Did he say that because he was addressing those comments to his base? And if not, why wouldn't he be more specific to and address the criticisms that are out there regarding that message?
This is a really important point. When the president walked out there today, a state of emergency had already been declared. You have now two different sides that are very angry. They are very concerned tonight about massive violence erupting between the two sides. They are very concerned about retaliation because you have two sides that are very angry right now. You had anger before this. You had people using cans of paint, using them as flamethrowers. You had both sides that have ratcheted up. The president's point was, and it was a responsible point to make, when you have a state of emergency declared, you want both sides to calm down. You don't want retaliation for the white supremacists. You don't want people to go out and riot tonight. You don't want the white supremacists to get back together and have some game plan. When he said both sides, his point was clear. after condemning this, using the words display of hatred, bigotry, and violence, but you want both sides.
All right, last word, Van, and then we got to take a break, guys.
But the great thing about you, Ben, is that you yourself have condemned these people over and over and over again. And yet your president didn't. And so it's so weird to me to be talking to you because I've been so proud of you going by saying. Well, listen, I don't think the country agrees with you yet. Maybe he'll do better the next one, but so far, I think he missed an opportunity.